So I'll give you a brief overview. I want to talk about some of the most important brain networks, the default mode network, the salience network, and the central executive network. We'll talk about their functions and how they're affected in post-traumatic stress. And then we'll look at how can treatment with neurofeedback really influence some of those critical brain networks, and what could that mean clinically. So we're really talking about brain plasticity and restoration of some of the critical brain networks through neurofeedback. And so when we look at the three networks we're going to be focusing on today, the first one is called the default mode network. And as most of you will be aware from all the webinars that you've done with CBERN, is that this is a critical resting state network of the brain. So when our brain is, involved in looking inside, and when it's sort of in an idling mode, like a car being in neutral, this brain network is most connected, and it's thought to be absolutely critical for experiencing the kind of sense of self that we do. So we've sort of coined this network as being critical for, really representing the sense of self. It's also important in recalling autobiographical memories, so memories that happen to you. It's also important in helping us to know what we feel, and it's also critical in helping us have an embodied sense of ourselves. And especially the front part of the network is also really important for future-oriented thinking. So that's the major brain network that's active at rest, and that represents the sense of self. And then we also have the salience network, and as the name already tells us, it helps us to figure out what's most salient both inside ourselves, but also in the external world. And when we think about trauma, that often goes very wrong in trauma. Often individuals who've been traumatized overemphasize something in terms of salience, but also underemphasize something in terms of salience. So when someone is very hypervigilant, often many things become salient that really aren't. But also by contrast, when you're disconnected from your feelings and when you're disconnected from your internal world, things that should be salient sometimes aren't because you're so disconnected. And I think individuals who live in situations of domestic violence often find this, that they report to us that they're not afraid, or they're not aware that they're afraid of the individual that hurts them in the relationship. And so I think this is really related to the salience network not being online enough to help them be aware of their fear. And then we have the central executive network, and that's really involved in attention to the external world. And that really helps us to engage in thinking, in planning, and so those really active things that we do when we're involved in cognitive functioning and cognitive problem solving. And of course, we have to kind of balance paying attention to the internal world and paying attention to the external world. And the salience network helps us to switch back and forth between the default mode network that represents a sense of self, and that really helps us to look internally, and attention to the external world. So that salience network really helps us to switch back and forth. Great. So of course, the first question is, are our brains plastic, and can we change network connectivity? And as we all know, first as therapists, we know we can change brain network connectivity because we see how our clients change over time in therapy. And I don't think any of us would be here today if we didn't believe that. But we've also, of course, shown this neuroscientifically, that we can change these critical networks through neurofeedback. Everybody is familiar with the EEG neurofeedback loop. I'll just review it again, just in case some people have signed up who are not familiar with neurofeedback. And so what happens is that we place an electrode on the individual's head, and that picks up the brain signal from cortical areas. And we've then programmed the computer based on what we know is happening in post-traumatic stress, for example. And in this case, what we'll be talking about today is we're trying to change the alpha level in the brain. And so we've programmed the computer, and whenever the individual changes the alpha level in the brain, and they learn this very easily, in this case, they see a spaceship moving forward. So when they see the spaceship moving forward, they know that they've changed the alpha level appropriately. And when that doesn't happen, they know that they need to do something different to do so. And so they get direct feedback, and thereby are able to really change their brain waves. So it's simply another form of biofeedback.